We normally just crash in mid.
Hello.
conversation.
Right, so
okay.
we're going to talk about soundtracks. We've got the wonderful John back.
Hi, John.
First time ever on the Vialucci podcast. Third time guest host.
Yeah.
Third time. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So he's the only bloke that's been on 3 times. That's what I'm saying.
I think this is 4th time.
No.
Well, you said there was no, it's my 4th time now because we had the Valentine's, Christmas, and Oscars. So I've been 4 times.
Right, yeah. Oh, the 4th time. First
Okay.
person.
Okay.
All right. I'm saying you've got to keep near the mic.
Okay.
At least
So
you're taking the shot.
So basically,
Before you start, so I was going to ask you a question. So you know, you're saying you were going to see Endgame.
yeah.
Will they have had the same composer the whole way through all of those films?
Possibly.
Is that the norm?
They sometimes with
Because it changed directors, or did they?
well, sometimes with film soundtracks it can change. I mean, with like Star Wars, for example, John Williams has been consistent. With the Star Trek soundtracks, it's been, I think there was Jerry Goldsmith, Leonard Rosenman, James Horner, Cliff Idleman. I think trying to remember who was the music on a guy. Trying to remember who wrote the music for Generations. But they do change. I mean, the later ones, like the new one, is for the new Star Treks with J.J. Abrams, is Michael Giacchino, who has done. He's done things like the Pixar films and stuff.
Didn't he do Rogue? He's done the spin-offs as well, hasn't he? He did Rogue One and I think Solo, but very much as a motif of.
Yeah,
of
but also John Williams. I mean, again, the John Williams thing has been pretty much an influence. Okay, so I sort of did ask you to do a bit of homework. Now, we're going to kick off with the track that I should listen to, which is The City in the Clouds from Empire Strikes Back. So my question to you is, how many Star Wars themes did you detect in that theme?
It almost felt like it was the greatest hits. It almost felt like it was a medley of all of them because I was listening. Right. I was like, oh, okay, so there's a hint of Vader's theme or the Imperial March, I suppose. You've got is it Han's theme or Leia's theme?
It's the Han and Leia. So there are So to cut to the chase, there are 4 themes in there. There is Luke's theme, Obi-Wan's theme, Yoda's theme, and the Han and Leia theme. If you listen to the first 4 elements of it, you can actually hear what is a variation.
We just explain what this is. What was it you sent us? It was the.
Oh yeah.
Well, it's okay. So the sequence is the City in the Cloud sequence is basically.
No, but you sent us a link of that. And the Empire was
Empire Strikes Back, City in the Clouds. So the sequence
and that 5-minute thing was a medley of.
So it's actually a key montage of themes in the sequence, which basically cuts between Luke on Dagobah to Han and Leia in the asteroid field to when they're on the back of the Imperial thing to when they go to Cloud City.
Yeah.
So the reason I asked you to listen to it, it's an example of what composers, I believe, do. I mean, Jerry Goldsmith told one of the younger composers that what you do is you write 3 or 4 themes and then build your score around it. Now, John Williams worked under Jerry Goldsmith, scoring some TVs. I mean, and he composed the Twilight Zone theme. So Goldsmith actually says, and he said this to one of the younger composers, he said, what you do is you write 3 or 4 themes, and then you base your soundtrack around it. So if you listen to that track, that's an example. But if you listen to things like Raiders of the Lost Ark, Steven Spielberg wanted a real majestic theme for Raiders of the Lost Ark. So it was da-da-da-da, da-da-da. Oh. And then John Williams wrote a thing, da-da-da, da-da-da-da. And then Spielberg said, well, why don't you combine them? And then that's what he did. Yeah. So, and then and it's all relative to what the film demands. So, for example, with Jaws, the famous story is John Williams sat down and goes, this is going to be your theme for Jaws. He went, bum, 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 bum. He goes, are you crazy? But the funny thing is it's actually, when you combine that with the suggestion of the shark in Jaws, with the fact that the shark didn't work, it actually is quite powerful because this is why music strikes a chord with the audience. And sometimes if you listen to a lot of movies, when you listen to Jaws or Star Wars or Raiders or Alien or any of these classic films, the music actually does take over. You can't imagine the movie without that.
Yeah, so now that you just say that, when you think about Jaws, if that music wasn't there, it's nothing.
Well, you've also got just a lot of water. Yeah, a lot of shots of.
You're scared of the stop music. That's what you're scared of. Oh right, yeah. So who did Jaws?
John Williams. And he won an Academy Award for that.
Did they use that? Did they use it in all the Jaws films?
Yeah.
Yes, it's the basic theme. I mean, even Alan Parker, who the composer Alan Parker who did Jaws 3, it's at the very beginning, and they, like there's a bit at the beginning. There's a thing at the beginning where because that was the 3D version.
Yeah.
And just as like they're showing the 3D titles and the 3D title goes bum da 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 da. It goes bum 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 bum. And it's like there's a certain pump to it, and it's just so simple but so effective.
Yeah.
If you take John Carpenter's theme for Halloween, da 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 da, and again, that theme literally freaks more people out.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's right, yeah.
And the famous story is when he made Halloween, he showed it to an executive without the music, and she wasn't scared of all the music.
Yeah.
Really added something to it.
And I suppose after the second one, it becomes like Pavlovian conditioning. The music starts, and then immediately your sort of biology starts to
that
kick.
was exactly what made seeing the recent Halloween sequel so effective, because I was in the multimedia screening in the front row, and it was just great because suddenly you saw those titles and that theme, and we were like me and some other people going, yeah, because that's the great thing is sometimes with a lot of these scores they're like old friends.
Yeah.
And it's something to reflect on, because often one of the reasons I wanted to do this tonight was because I want to celebrate soundtracks. And again, I'm not doing this as a top 5. What I have done, though, is I've put together some ideas and stuff that is. I mean, I've already said about the composers. So my next question to you is, what was the first soundtrack you guys ever bought?
Right, so I've never bought one, so... Oh, no, I haven't, no. Have you ever bought one?
Now. Yeah, I'm trying to think now. It probably was, I suppose, it would be one of the Tarantino's.
That's exactly what I was talking about.
I can't remember, the sort of, so I suppose the curated soundtrack rather than a proper, I mean, in terms of actual film scores, maybe...
Right, so is there a film...
Like I've had albums where it's like, oh, here are the 10, 20 or so best movie.
Yeah, I thought soundtracks were like songs, but then is there a score?
Well, the score is I would say is the music. That would be
there's the orchestra score and there's the soundtrack.
Yeah,
so, for example, I presume you're talking about Pulp Fiction, aren't you?
Yeah, it's either Pulp Fiction or
Reservoir
Dogs. One of the
Jackie
two.
Brown,
I did buy them both, but I can't remember.
Okay, so I'm going to reveal what my first one was. I think the first one to come into our house was probably Star Wars. We had it on a cassette. But then when I was about 11 or 12, we had we bought in the space of a few months, we bought the Spy Who Loved Me soundtrack, Flash Gordon. Now Flash Gordon was so unique at the time because it was not only the music, but it also had dialogue from the film.
Yeah.
So they had like at the very beginning of when you listen to the album, you have so it opens with Maxwell saying, "Clytus, I'm bored. What sort of plaything can you offer me today?" Unfortunately, it doesn't feature "Gordon's alive."
But you do get I'm blind on a rocket cycle.
But they had, but they used it on the singles. So on the single for Queen's Flash, they actually had "Gordon's alive." It's on the single, but it's not featured in the Thash's theme on there. But there's things like, other things we bought. We bought the James Bond 10th anniversary.
Okay.
Which was actually a compilation of all the great themes from Dr. No through to Diamonds Are Forever. And it was all John Barry's score. And there was things like Under the Mango Tree. There was We Have All the Time in the World. It was a wonderful cassette that we bought. And I bought that alongside the Moonraker soundtrack.
Yeah.
But I also had a couple of music and dialogue story albums. One of them was The Empire Strikes Back. And the other one was The Saga of Battlestar Galactica, which had Lorne Greene doing the thing. So it was like an MCA record. I also bought the Buck Rogers in the 25th Century soundtrack, which there was a great theme track called Suspension by Kip Lennon, and the original theatrical version had this Bond-esque title sequence. So it's, Princess Ardala and Colonel Deering looking rather fetching in a dress.
So you're at 11 years old. You were into the sound. Of
funny enough, I remember my father bringing home to my mother at one lunchtime the double album of Saturday Night Fever.
You see, that I can understand because you go, okay, I like the songs. But if you listen to it score, that I don't. That's.
But it's.
I'm trying to think now. What I would have been about. Yeah, I'd have been about that age.
To buy a score, not a song like.
No, because I'm trying to remember which one's first. Because also it would have been maybe it was like my brother brought one, and but I remember. Yeah, we used to have things like the soundtracks from musicals as well. But we used to have I'm trying to think what musical score, but I mean things like Highlander, for example.
Actually,
I mean that's basically a Queen album.
Actually, here's the thing. I went to a fun fair on Bonfire Night one time. It was it was around the same time. Must have been 1981. And you know those coconut shies and you win prizes?
Yeah.
Well, they obviously must have got a whole stash of these albums somewhere, but it was the stage version of Mac and Mabel.
What the hell's that?
So, if you remember Torval and Dean, one of their routines, they actually used the overture for one of their ice dance routines. So, of course, everybody was laughing at me and thinking, not the Mac and Mabel, and it was the original Robert Preston, Bernadette Peters score. So I took it home, and my parents played it, and suddenly the music, because it sort of became famous because of Torval and Dean. But it's like there's. I mean, my mother got the soundtrack of Lady Sings the Blues, which is the Diana Ross biopic about Billie Holiday, and that was on tape. I am unashamed to admit that the very first single I ever bought was "Can't Stop the Music" by Village People.
Yeah, but come on, we all like laugh a bit.
Parents started looking at it a bit funny.
When no one else is looking.
But yeah, so that's more or less my choices. But on to the little list and stuff. I mean, for example, if you take Tubular Bells, the Exorcist thing.
I think I had somebody copy that for me. There you go. I have done it. I have.
Have you listened to the whole 25 minutes?
I'm talking about Yeezy. I have no idea.
The funny thing is, I actually like the
Mike Oldfield.
Mike Oldfield. Yeah. But the funny thing is, the whole track is fantastic. It's one of the weirdest and most wonderful tracks ever, because obviously we think of the music that they play in the Exit, which is probably about 4 minutes worth, and then it cuts into this whole multi-instrumental segue. And I love it. I love it on its own terms rather than although I love it as part of the Exorcist.
It must have been you that were telling me something about the Exorcist music, something about that song and the film. There was some story about it. No, it's gone.
Yeah.
No? All right, go on. Sorry.
It's not the best anecdote, I'll be honest.
No, I remember saying there was some... No, forget it. It's gone. Okay, go on.
So, going on to the thing about scores, it's hard to imagine things like Scorsese and Tarantino not using songs. His new one, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, is actually, I think, is going to. I presume, knowing what Tarantino's going to do, is going to be a lot of late 60s.
Yeah, because you got to go. They're trying to get an era, aren't they?
Yeah.
So the music is just an easy way to get to it.
But then he does throw in sort of. Films that aren't, so songs that aren't Django Unchained features rap songs.
Yeah. Really? I didn't realize.
Yeah, not many, but I mean,
Kill Bill's soundtrack's fantastic. I mean, some of the stuff that there's a version of Don't Let Me Be Misunderstood, but I actually like the music. There's a band, a Japanese guitar instrumental band who, the famous dum bum bum ba da 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 dum bum. There's a great track which was on the trailer for Kill Bill, and again, the way that he picks like songs like Bang Bang by Nancy Sinatra, and then they use like Twisted. There's a song called Twisted from Vertigo or somewhere, like they use the band.
Yeah, they do use it. That rings a bell. They do reuse them at Vertigo.
But he has such a. I mean, Scorsese. Probably his most prominent use of songs and soundtrack was Casino. There's about 40 cuts. I mean, things like on Goodfellas, he used the play out of Layla. Things like Rags to Riches. I can't imagine a Scorsese film without him using music, because it is so prominent. The whole.
I saw when Terminator 2 came out. I saw that there was the making of it, and they were doing the filming bit where they're in the factory, and the two robots are hitting each other with like metal things, and they did it without any music on it. And it was just two blokes hitting each other. I thought, wow, like it just goes ting, pung, pung.
Well, because those films are sort of across, particularly the first one, it's a horror and an action film. Yeah. It's a stalker who's a robot. So you need the music to tell you.
Yeah.
it's very bleak in places, those films, and so is the soundtrack.
But of course, it has an amusing thing in Terminator 2. When Terminator emerges from the bar, they use Jules Thorogood and the Destroyers, "Bad to the Bone."
Yeah.
Which of course is the song that they used in Christine.
Yeah, I mean, because again, I think that points to a lighter tone in Terminator 2. Although it has its bleak moments, I think of the two, it certainly will disregard the sequels, as I think they are planning to do.
So
anyway.
where do scores come in? Is that part of the initial process?
What it is how the process works is they probably do commission a score person to write the score probably from the outset. So in the Star Wars films,
their style.
They say, they'll say, well, because a director wants to work with that composer.
Right, yeah.
But what they will do is at a later stage, when they have a specific rough cut of the film, then what they will do is they'll go in with the music editor and the director and then the composer, and then they'll show a cut of it and they'll say, well, look, this is where we want music there. I want music at that point and that point. And I mean, there was an interesting there was a documentary around the time of Empire Strikes Back called Star Wars Music by John Williams, and you could actually see him at work, and they were showing sequences like they had a scene showing like the famous Han and Leia scene. Goes, so what? And he said, doesn't that grate open there? And then he would go away and write, and then he would work with like an editor, and he'll say, and they're going through the sequence gently like that.
Has anyone ever been sacked as a sound guy?
Well,
as a composer.
The most famous one where somebody actually composed music was Alex North for 2001.
Yeah.
And what it was Stanley Kubrick, he wrote about 40 minutes of music, and then then Stanley Kubrick said, I'm going to go with the classic thing. So Alzor Sprax Zarathustra. You can actually buy a copy of the original Alex North score, which was composed by Jerry Goldsmith, online. If you get,
which didn't make it into the film.
But I've actually listened to it, and the funny thing is it serves its purpose. The actual theme that Alex North wrote for 2001 is different, and I don't think the film would have had the impact if you listen to.
Has anyone done sort of a cut, taking out the original score and putting in the Alex North? Is there
a lot of if you go on
YouTube,
if you go but if you go on YouTube, I mean, funny enough, I've seen people do their own versions of, like somebody took the David Arnold score from like Casino Royale, and they dubbed it onto a version of License to Kill. So you can actually hear how the music. Whether or not that's a way of doing it, I mean, it's great, but it's like, well, I think the creative choices that the director makes about the composer they have at the time is actually a good one. And when the movie's out there, I mean, some people will look at there are certain things where, when I look at some of like the Bond scores, like Bill Conti, I mean, Bill Conti's score for Your Eyes Only is kind of little bit weird, whereas people like John Barry, Michael Kamen, like Eric Serra's score on GoldenEye, for example, again was a little different, but it uses it in a different way, and it's a different style because they were making a new change for Pierce Brosnan. But I think David Arnold actually, he's done. He did a real first-rate thing because he's more closer in spirit to what John Barry did with that. And when I hear that music, it's great. And then, I mean, Thomas Newman's, who's taken over the reins for the later Craigs, is really good as well. But it's a different style, so it's all relative to what.
I guess maybe that's them shifting because obviously the first two Craigs, he's rough and ready Bond, and they very quickly shifted to so now he's slightly grizzled.
Yeah.
Bond.
Yeah.
I've got a random thing I've just remembered to do with sound. This is my little snippet that I'm throwing in.
Okay, here it comes.
Do you know, what's it called? Not Resident Evil. Return of the Living Dead 2.
Yeah.
Have you seen it?
Because isn't this? Oh no, yeah, we won't get into the splintering of the different Living Dead franchises.
Right, so it's the second one where the paramedics, the zombie says, "Send more paramedics,
send more brains." Yeah,
send more. Yeah, and the scene with the naked chick who's dancing on the tombstone.
Yeah.
The music that you listen to when she's dancing is actually another song, which makes sense when you watch it, but they couldn't get the rights, so they had to overdub it with this song. But the original song she's dancing to is a song, I think it's in the 80s, called Nasty Girl. So if you Google the song Nasty Girl, I think Biggie Smalls did one after, but the original Nasty Girl.
Funny enough, I actually was watching the very first Return of the Living Dead today, and I was, again, that's a soundtrack that uses heavy metal, you know.
The punks,
stuff like that. But it's, you know, I mean...
Hang on, so that's my little thing that I'm throwing in there.
Okay, yeah.
Well, wasn't it? Yeah, because, I mean, for example, the 89 Batman, Prince did the score for that, but no, I don't think there wasn't any...
Did he really?
No.
There's no correlation.
Well, some of the songs, again, that was a strange one, because Bat Dance, which was the actual main favourite song of that, I mean, it was, I think Party Man was on the set, when Jack Nicholson's Joker goes into the thing, Party Man's the actual track, but the Danny Elfman orchestra scores in there. But I think they did it because I think it sort of helped sell tickets, because it was part of the hype. But I don't recall, I only ever recall Party Man or I think The Arms of Orion, or there was about 2 or 3 tracks in there.
Yeah, there's not many that's actually in the film, but apparently, like, you know, he was just like, oh, these are my tracks, and they're like, oh, okay, are you gonna, you know, and it was like, there's no matching. I think apart from when he's on the floats, I think that song is there.
No, there's about 2 or 3 in there, but again, it's a rarity where the soundtrack, you know, I think it was good publicity, and I think the fact that Prince was on there. I mean, if you take Madonna, for example, on her films, for example, with like Who's That Girl?
Oh, do we have
to? No, but seriously, it's like the version of Into the Groove, which is on the soundtrack of Desperately Seeking Susan, is actually a little different, because when Madonna made Desperately Seeking Susan, she was not quite a star. It was still an independent movie. And again, she hadn't, you know, she was sort of up and coming, and she was doing the Virgin.
Probably her only good one, though, isn't it?
It still is, yeah. It's seriously, you know, she's, you know, the thing is, you know, if you take Shanghai Surprise, for example, it's like you can't, you know, seeing Madonna as a nun. I mean, I know that she's very religious, but the film didn't work anyway. And it's like, well, the chemistry was all wrong. I mean, I actually saw it opening week when it opened. And again, the only virtue of it is there's a great credit sequence by Maurice Binder, you know, but it doesn't work. It's a strange concoction that tried to be like a Raiders of the Lost Ark. And the thing is, I think the book itself was totally different. And I just felt it was just one of the things, because, you know, to exude all that sex and all that kind of the way she is, and she's promoting sex and that kind of image, you know, people aren't going to go for it. They already know. I mean, with Who's That Girl, for example, that was a movie that was trying to be a screwball comedy, but the soundtrack is actually really, really good. It's one of those, like, you know, I think, along with Top Gun, for example, I think Top Gun is a better soundtrack than the film. I don't think. You know, I think there's some great tracks on there. The Harold Faltermeyer theme, and, you know, Danger Zone and Take My Breath Away, and some.
I mean, they get their money's worth out of Danger Zone, don't they? That plays about 10 times in that film.
Yeah.
But
again, I think Don Simpson and Jerry Bruckheimer really knew their stuff when it came to soundtracks. When you look at Flashdance, and you look at, you know, I mean, American Gigolo, for example, the use of Call Me by Blondie, Giorgio Moroder's score on things like you know, like Flashdance. Stallone, for example, some of the tracks, you know, if you listen to like Rocky IV, for example, they've got some great ones, and they're like John Cafferty's Hearts on Fire. Somebody's actually combined that track with the, you know, the bit where that bit of music that combines it. There's actually a full version on there, but the original album track doesn't feature it, and everybody gets pissed off because they want to hear it. Because the thing is, just, again, this is with soundtracks, is when you watch a movie, you are so... You have that moment so ingrained on your mind because of the music, and then when it doesn't play on the soundtrack, it's weird. There's other things like, you know, there was like on Saturday Night Fever, for example, the soundtrack. Jive Talking is on the soundtrack, but it's not in the film. Because the story goes that Robert Stigwood wanted some songs for Saturday Night Fever, and that's why the tracks like Staying Alive and Night Fever, they were just a bunch of songs for their next album. But they found it into the film, and then it became a huge success. And it's one of the most successful soundtracks of all time.
So how did that work with the movie and the music? What came first? Like, what happened there?
Well, it was a soundtrack. Funny enough, it was
So the Bee Gees had released those songs?
No, the Bee Gees had conceived these songs.
Right.
and then as part of the soundtrack for Saturday Night Fever, they sort of put him as part of it. So it's
right.
one of the early modern day film tie-ins. And then, of course, there was Grease, another double album with, again, Grease and You're the One That I Want, which I think was number one in England for the UK for 8 weeks back in 78. I mean, the amount of times I watched Top of the Pops and that bloody song was still playing. That said, I do like it.
So who did the score for Rocky, the first one?
Bill Conti.
And what else has he done?
Well, just so funny enough, he's done some great. He did For Your Eyes Only. He also won an Academy Award for The Right Stuff, which is the Philip Kaufman film about the.
But he did Rocky 1, did he?
He did
They got him.
He did.
Rocky.
He did Rocky 1, 2, 3.
Oh right.
Vince DiCola did Rocky 4. Bill Conti did Rocky 5 and Rocky Balboa. I don't think he's done the 2 Creed films, but he also did The Karate Kid.
Oh, okay.
So
Which is all directed by the same
John
guy.
G. Avildsen. I mean, that's another great soundtrack. I mean, you can listen to the final scene with the crane kick. And
35 years old, that film.
yeah.
I know The Karate Kid.
And still a cracking movie. And of course,
it's a great.
And of
it's
course,
great
have you seen the new online Cobra Kai thing?
Oh no, I haven't actually. A lot of people tell me.
It
to
is.
watch it.
I've got to tell you, they've got a couple of free episodes. I guarantee it's really good fun because what they do is they open it with the actual final kick, and Johnny basically is retiring, and like Ralph Macchio is a bit of a sleazeball.
Yeah, I think they said
that what they've done in the second season, they've now got the Cobra Kai and they've got the Daniel Miyagi-Do together, and it's back to what it was before.
Oh,
So the
okay.
tension is back
with them as the
the
and Mr. Miyagi gone.
Yeah, he passed away.
he's dead.
No, but I mean, even in the show.
No, he's. I mean, it's basically Daniel LaRusso, and it's the same actor as Ralph Macchio, who's executive producer, and William Zabka, who plays Johnny, who's like the thing. I mean, they all look a lot older, but it's absolutely. I think even Martin Cove's in it as Creed.
Yeah, I think they brought him back, haven't they?
And it's just fantastic.
How are they getting episodes out? Like, what is it? Is it turning?
It's on
it's
a YouTube that if you go online, if you go onto YouTube, there's a couple of free episodes, but I think what it is they're trying to tempt you to subscribe to the next one. So again, it's a stream.
But what I mean is, what's the ongoing episodes? Is it like a teenagey thing where? Like, what's the build?
No, I think it's 2 middle-aged men, and they peaked.
It's the kind.
There's no competition.
It's the conflict. It's the conflict and rivalry. I mean, there is like fighting in there. There is a trailer online.
Yeah.
And I watched it out of curiosity, and I thought this actually works well because the opening scene is actually when he does the crane kick. They actually show a bird's eye shot of the guy on the ground.
Oh, okay.
And then it's sort of and it's really neat. They're on. I think they're about 25 minutes each. These episodes.
Yeah, I've heard nothing but good things about it.
Okay.
But it's very good. So yeah, so he's done like he did The Right Stuff, which is the Philip Kaufman movie with Chuck Yeager and the Mercury 7. It's a brilliant score. Listen to Yeager's Triumph, which is the track that which is the final climax. It's a 3-hour movie, but it's a really epic thing. So that's another of my choices.
Okay, so hold on. So let's recap on the choices because we in our usual way we've meandered somewhat. So what have we got so far as your choices? We had.
So we've got. So I'm going to be moving on to the composers that and honourable mentions in a minute. So I've done Bill Conti and Tubular Bells in 2001 and Pulp Fiction. So so what I've got now is 5 composers. These are my 5. Again, this is just I've picked 3 of their soundtracks. So the 5 are Jerry Goldsmith, John Williams, James Horner, Lalo Schifrin, and Ennio Morricone. Mm-hmm. So in the case of Jerry Goldsmith, the 3 tracks I've picked are Star Trek The Motion Picture, Chinatown, and Under Fire. We will review these when we've gone through the list. John Williams, Empire Strikes Back, Superman and Raiders of the Lost Ark. James Horner, Battle Beyond the Stars, Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, and 48 Hours. Lalo Schifrin, Bullet, Dirty Harry and the Amityville Horror. And then Ennio Morricone, The Untouchables, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and The Mission.
So there's a lot of sci-fi in there.
There are some sci-fi, but there's a lot of classic stuff in there. So Under Fire is actually a 1983 movie about photojournalists in Nicaragua.
I was going to say, I don't think I know that one.
It's Nick Nolte, Gene Hackman, and Joanna Cassidy.
Okay.
And it's about the Sandinista conflict in Nicaragua in 1979. It's directed by Roger Spottiswoode, who did the Tomorrow Never Dies Bond film.
Oh, okay.
But he's also worked as an editor. He worked as an editor for Walter Hill on things like on Sam Peckinpah, I should say. He worked as an editor on Straw Dogs, and he also worked on 48 Hours. But it's a really great score, great use of panpipes. Was nominated for
a great use of panpipe.
it was
But it definitely
it
gets
was
it
like
in.
the Brazilian thing, but it was nominated for an Academy Award in 1983. Actually lost out to The Right Stuff.
Oh, okay.
But it's one of those political thrillers, you know, and Nick Nolte and Gene Hackman are in a love triangle with Joanna Cassidy, and they end up in the middle of conflicts and stuff, and they're taking photos of the actual
I think I have seen this film now. Did you say Ed Harris?
Ed Harris.
Yeah, I have seen this film a long time ago.
And it's a
yeah.
bit like, in some ways, it's a little bit like the Jennifer Connelly character in Blood Diamond, you know. That
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
thing.
I do remember now. yeah.
Chinatown, you probably know, is the Roman Polanski classic,
Yeah.
which is Jack Nicholson and Jake Gittis. She's a private detective in 1940s Chinatown.
Have you not seen it, Theo? Oh, you need to. You would love it as well. It's 70s as
I'd
well.
like
It's your era. Yeah, you would really
1974. Very much a really great film. Probably regard in screenwriting circles, Robert Towne's screenplay is regarded.
And what's the synopsis without ruining it?
It's a tricky one.
Okay, so
Yeah? Why?
Jake Gittis is approached by a woman called Mrs. Moray to wonder why her husband, who runs Water and Power in Los Angeles, is seeing another woman.
She's seeing another one.
She's seen another man, I should say.
Oh,
Seen
right,
another-
yeah.
So, of course, Jack Nicholson is kind of trying to do a bit of investigation. Then, all of a sudden, Faye Dunaway emerges into the scene, and then stuff happens.
Right.
Yeah,
That's about
to
it.
spoil any more than that.
I
would spoil
can't.
it,
I
but
can't.
watch
I,
it.
you have to kind
Okay.
of. I would just. Okay, so that's the first one. Okay, so on to John Williams. Empire Strikes Back, which I think is the best of the Star Wars scores. Superman, the movie, the original score is brilliant, and Raiders of the Lost Ark, of course,
Yeah.
just majestic. Those are,
Do they use that throughout the
Yeah.
it is the common thing.
even the recent ones?
yeah. It's
Okay.
still the spirit. You can't imagine
Because it's called the Raiders March.
It's called the
isn't it?
Raiders March.
Yeah.
There is actually, funnily enough, the actual opening of Raiders doesn't actually open with the theme. It actually opens with a very atmospheric, when it's emerging through, because the opening sequence is like the Paramount logo, and then it cuts to Peru, and then it has a dun, 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 dun,
Do any of them open with the Raiders March? I don't think any of them did.
No, they open very, like, the second one opens with Anything Goes.
Yes, yeah.
But they actually aren't like, and in the third one, there's again it's atmospheric music, and then in the fourth one, it's actually there's like a Bill Haley's track, you know, when they're driving along, they're
'cause
driving towards the base.
And the Paramount logo becomes a molehill. Or
Yeah,
something,
yeah.
doesn't it? And you're like, oh.
But they used like it was a Chinese version of Anything Goes, sung by Kate Capshaw in the Temple of Doom. But again, it's they're normally at the end of it. I mean, the Raiders theme, the actual complete Raiders theme, plays over the climax of Raiders. But I actually have the complete soundtrack, so it includes all the cuts. You know, like the opening sequence. Then it opens with the Raiders theme at the beginning, but the second track is actually the opening music. But yeah, so that's that one. Now on to my next one, James Horner. I've still rated his soundtrack for Battle Beyond the Stars, which was the space remake of Magnificent Seven.
Yeah.
And it's significant because it was also the movie that gave James Cameron and Gail Ann Hurd one of their early things, because James Cameron was art director on Battle Beyond the Stars. Okay. And of course, later on, James Cameron worked with James Horner on Titanic and Aliens.
What does art director mean specifically? Special effects?
Well, it's kind of like
So that's where he started.
Actual design. I mean, the most famous story was, of course, they didn't have the Hero spacecraft. And James Cameron just sort of said, well, and it's in this book on Roger Moore, he said, well, what does he like? He likes Amazon women and tits. So he designed a spacecraft with tits.
And that vaguely rings out, because I always muddle Battle Beyond the Stars with The Last Starfighter, but I know Battle Beyond the Stars is you've even got those aliens that like eat each other's food, and you know, like one goes.
It's Nestor. It's Nestor. There's a great joke in that where they're like psychic, and he goes, we got 5 of us on the ship, and 4 of us piloted. And then Richard Thomas says, what about the 5th? He goes, we always carry a spare. But it also features things like Sybil Danning as Saint Exmin, and she says, you've never seen anything until you've seen a Valkyrie go down. But it's got like George Peppard as Cowboy. It's got Robert Vaughn.
Vaughn, yeah,
as
isn't it? As the
Gelt.
nod to.
And it's got Morgan Woodward as Cayman of the Lambda Zone, and it's got John Saxon as a really delicious villain in as Sador. But it's great because it was shot in a lumberyard in Venice.
Yeah.
You know, and they said in the book but it was shot for about 2 or 3 million. And what's great about it is the James Horner score is still fantastic. You can listen to it online, and I still think if you listen to that song and then listen to Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan, it's great anyway. But as I say, 48 Hours. The track Subway Station is actually the music that was featured on the trailer.
So this is the Eddie Murphy.
Nick Nolte. And it's such a contrasting score to the early ones, but there's a thing called Subway Station where they're pursuing Luther into the thing, and that music was actually sampled on the Arnold Schwarzenegger film Commander trailer.
Yeah, because I always remember that. I always remember watching 48 Hours and going, hold on, isn't that the theme from Commando? But it's obviously it's
but
not.
Of course,
it must be the trailer,
because it came on. But this is what happens. They often sample music from other films for things. So, for example, in Die Hard, the opening, closing scenes where spoiler alert, guys, but when Argyle shoots Carl, the music from that was taken from Aliens.
You'd think they'd want to keep away from that sort of thing.
But funny enough, they sampled a score, John Scott's score from Man on Fire for the ending again, because they so in Spy Love Me, John Glenn, who was editing, he actually used Lawrence of Arabia when their van breaks down, the scene where they're going off to the boat. They used Maurice Jarre's score for Lawrence of Arabia. So it's sometimes the music will be used the music will then can be used pretty well. So sometimes, like with Bad to the Bone, for example, Cameron said, I was reading 4 screenplays today, the editors felt it wasn't serious enough. But then the funny thing is it worked because they wanted to establish the character. Say, well, he's back, we don't do it. And it was a fun thing. So that was
Horner's score for, in Star Trek 3, the Klingons theme is the same as the Alien. A part is reused in Aliens, isn't it? It's the same.
That's totally different. That was actually used as it was a different sample. It was like it's the same style, but when you when you watch, if you were to listen to Horner scores from 1983, things like Gorky Park and Brainstorm, 2 other soundtracks I'd recommend. His thing evolved. So, and I think it kind of changed around Braveheart. The soundtrack he did for Braveheart actually sort of segued into what he did the music on Titanic and beyond. And Titanic was one of the most successful soundtracks in '98. I mean, it was in the top 10 albums. But again, watching his style of thing evolve, it was really interesting. So that's James Horner. Now, Lalo Schifrin, without question, wrote one of the all-time great jazz.
Because I don't know the name at all.
Bullet.
Oh, okay. Now
he composed the music. He composed the music for Bullet, Dirty Harry, and the Amityville Horror. Again, his jazz style that he created for when you listen to that music. Again, that's another one where it's impossible to imagine the music. The film without the music, and there's the opening sequence is a really great jazzy score, and all throughout it's the whole style of it. There's a track on it called "The Aftermath of Love," which again you can vaguely hear after Johnny Ross gets shot in the hotel. You can hear it on the radio. If you've heard the soundtrack and you're wondering, well, where was that play? You can actually hear this very faint radio play. The Amityville Horror, for example, is a really eerie kind of thing. Probably one of the best horror scores, like The Omen. It's like really la 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 la, and again that kind of adds to the tension because the Amityville house is like that really, and it's the kind of the use of the strings and the brass and stuff.
I mean, you mentioned The Omen. I always thought that score, that kind of down, I can't do it, but but it's so effective because you don't see. It's not like The Exorcist where all these people are possessed and da 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 da. A lot of them, they stare, but it's like the dog.
But the actual chant, the music, the Ave Satani. I mean, Goldsmith won the Oscar for that. The track Ave Satani, Sani, and it's kind of weird how. because there's actual words for that. It's like you hear it one way when you do it, but then you realise, like with Duel of the Fates for John Williams on the when he did that famous theme from Phantom Menace, and you're hearing it, and he's got like the choir and this.
What is that language that they're singing in?
I think it might be Latin or something. I think he's obviously.
Yeah, it must be. Yeah.
I think what Williams did was he obviously wanted to go like with Goldsmith did on that one. He was looking for a very ominous chant, and he kind of had an idea about when he was playing the music, and he was dum bum, and it's that kind of thumping track that really terrifies it. But then, of course, he sort of contrasts it with like the love theme, like the music for Robert and Kathy Thorne, the opening scene when Robert Thorne says to Kathy, he goes, "It's me. I've become ambassador to London." And then it cuts to the sequence where they're showing the cab in London and they're going to their big house, and then there's a whole sequence where it's very playful and gentle, but then it cuts into the whole thing. I mean, that's the one thing where there's a lot of, it's kind of very emotional in terms of evoking the actual the style of it, and that's
it's a real slow burner, isn't it, The Omen? When you watch it, you always think of the moment, the spoiler alert, the guy getting his head sliced off, and but the funny thing is there is no music in that sequence. Yeah.
It's like, and then of course with the scene like when the priest gets and so
Skewered.
we're gonna it's but
the
again
thing falls on it,
but the funny thing is the actual music is building and building and building. Then all of a sudden when then the spike comes down, it just cuts down, and then you cut to that. So it's like one of the skills of using music in films is that you actually it's about knowing when to use it. Now, if you take the 1979 film version of Scum, there is no music whatsoever.
So that's the original.
The film version, not the TV version.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Because they remade it because Scum had been banned on TV, so they did a film version with Ray Winston, again the same actors.
Yeah.
But when
say that again. So what was it originally? A TV show?
It was a TV play called Playful Today called.
And that wasn't
Scum.
allowed on TV.
It was banned at the time.
So they made a film.
So they decided.
Oh, right.
So that Alan Clark, who was the writer and director of the original version, decided to use the same actors, including Ray Winston, because it was actually Ray Winston's first ever major.
Right.
I mean, he did it. It was around the same time, Quadrophenia. But again, that was the thing that struck me about that film was I watched it on Channel 4 when it was first on. And again, it was so striking because there was no music whatsoever.
Just echoes and doors slamming. And
I mean, another one that comes to mind is the China Syndrome, the Jane Fonda and. Okay, so it's the famous story is this is about a nuclear reactor that breaks down. The story goes that it was released, but about 3 weeks after it was released, there was real like 3 Mile Island exploded. And then it added to it. So it became so art imitating life. But again, that was on Sony Movie Channel recently. And I watched it. And again, aside from the American track at the beginning, there is no music at all. Even right on the credit sequence, it's just totally no
I have to watch that. I haven't seen that in a long time. You basically just, and Theo, you haven't seen any film with the word China or Chinese, like Chinatown, no.
Anything
China Syndrome, no.
What's the one with in China in New York? With the thing.
Big Trouble in Little China.
Yeah, I've seen that one.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's a great film.
So I think in a minute, let me just complete the next one because I will be talking about John Carpenter in a minute.
Okay.
Right.
So Ennio Morricone, The Untouchables, The Good, the Bad, the Ugly, and The Mission. Again, probably one of the most prolific composers of all time. He's probably made apparently in 1984. Here's a quick pop quiz for you. How many films do you think he composed by the time 1984 rolled around?
Over to you, Andrew.
What, as in the calendar year?
Total number of film scores.
God, because I'm going to say well into the 50s. I would have guessed.
Bigger.
What?
100?
No.
Bigger.
What?
200?
Bigger.
Bloody hell! 500?
Bigger.
What?
1,000?
That doesn't make any
Lower.
sense.
750.
Lower.
700?
Lower.
600?
Yes.
Blimey.
There was.
So how long was he doing that for, though?
Well, he was doing it for decades.
About 10, 20 a year.
They had a thing in Starburst on Italian cinema, and Ennio Morricone singing. And he said, well, he was the most prolific score composer in time with over 600 scores at that time. I mean, The Mission, for example, the music in that was actually used. If you're talking about samples, that was actually used on the trailer for Braveheart. Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is probably his most famous one for the spaghetti westerns. And The Untouchables, which is the Sean Connery, the actual big screen version, it's real great, majestic, really a real classic example where the music can, it's a big screen movie, but it's got such a heroic score and then
and the sort of that creepy sound for Capone, the da-da-dun.
No, that's the theme though.
Yeah, that's one. Yeah, sorry.
Bum 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 bum.
See, if you're watching this on the stream, you get the real treat. Yeah, we get the bobbing and everything.
Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about John Carpenter. I mean, I've got some honourable mentions. I mean, my favourite score of John Carpenter's is Escape from New York.
Okay.
Because it's really the one that has so much variety. I mean, it's also got one of his most, next to Halloween, it's probably his most famous one.
What's the thing? It's just a heartbeat.
Boom, boom, boom,
Boom, boom.
boom. Well, that's actually Ennio Morricone.
Oh, okay.
Because that answers my question. I was going to
Although Carpenter did admit that he actually used some electronic, like some atmospheric there's certain moments where Carpenter used some kind of electronic stuff in
Did
there.
they keep that sound in the last thing film? Did they use that boom boom?
Yeah, I mean, I think they used it in, I mean, you're talking about the prequel, aren't you?
Yeah, the
Yeah, they did they actually used, I think,
version of it.
They used the version of at the very end of it because it was basically because it was setting up.
Yeah,
the idea is you could mush them together and make one very long film.
But here are some other ones that I want to talk about. One of them is Michael Kamen. His scores for Die Hard and Robin and Prince of Thieves.
Yeah.
The bum da 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 da. I mean, Die Hard is the actually used the Beethoven Ode to Joy, but it's
when they finally get the bank open.
Yeah. Da, 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 da.
What do they use in? Did he do Die Hard with a Vengeance as well when they have the?
Yeah, I mean he did. Michael Kamen did all the scores for the Die Hard films. Well, I don't think he did. I think he was dead by the time they did because he died. After Die Hard with a Vengeance, I think he didn't. So he went
to his grave thinking, "We've made a perfect trilogy of action films here," not knowing what was to come.
Yeah, I mean, moving on to others. There's Jerry Fielding's The Wild Bunch from Sam Peckinpah, which is a really great atmospheric score. He had a really interesting style of music. It was, I think, it was a mixture of like wind and brass and stuff, and he actually used like military drums at the start of that film because the opening sequence of The Wild Bunch. Do you know the film?
I know of it.
I've seen it.
Okay, so it's about a bunch of aging outlaws who meet their end in 1910 Mexico. But the opening sequence, which is actually them arriving, it's a really great. And the music, it's one of those wonderful fusions of it. And actually, when Jerry Fielding's score main comes up, da 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 da, and it's like the freeze, and it's a wonderful bit of music at a pit, and it sort of announces Jerry Fielding's name. Okay, so another score that I recommend is Bruce Broughton's for Silverado. Now that was on. It's a great epic score, real classic Western type score. It was on Sony Movie Channel yesterday. I loved it. It's still one of my favorites from that one. Max Steiner's Gone with the Wind.
Yeah.
It's just that's beautiful. Wolfgang Eric Korngold's The Adventures of Robin Hood, the Errol Flynn movie, which again was an influence on John Williams for Star Wars. That was actually the style, because when George Lucas was doing Star Wars, he didn't want like an electronic score. In the 50s, for example, things like Forbidden Planets, if you listen to the electronic music, there's kind of an atmospheric, it's like computerized music. But George Lucas wanted a very emotional score. So getting back to The Empire Strikes Back, he wanted to do it. Elmer Bernstein, The Magnificent Seven and The Great Escape, classic scores. I mean, the dun 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 dun. People seem to forget that The Great Escape was a great score. It was not a bunch of wankers in England doing trumpets on a bloody football match. It's a great score. It's just, it's the whole thing is that people need to be reminded, look, it's not a football theme. It's a great score from the film.
I hate hearing it. I'm like, this was fine 20 years ago when you first started doing it. Stop.
Yeah. I would also, so moving on to a couple of three others now. Don Ellis's score for The French Connection, which is a bum 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 bum. I actually asked William Friedkin, when he came over for the Exorcist thing in '98, I asked him, I said, well, what was the reasoning behind it? And he said, well, actually, because he was in Chicago, he was a jazz composer in Chicago, and he wanted that kind of style for the film itself. And then two classic war scores, Dmitri Tiomkin's for The Guns of Navarone.
Okay.
He was actually blacklisted in America. It was around McCarthy. And so, of course, him and Carl Foreman, who was the writer on Guns of Navarone, they came over to Europe to do that film. And Dmitri Tiomkin did things like Rio Bravo, which inspired John Carpenter's Assault Precinct 13. And you can hear that as well. And probably my favourite British war theme is Ron Goodwin, Where Eagles Dare, which again is
That Clint Eastwood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Da, 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 da,
He's loving the.
I know.
okay.
The composing here.
So not missing the beat. I thought I'd talk to a little bit about my favourite Bond soundtracks.
Okay, we're moving on to Bond.
Bonds are definitely his favourite films.
Okay, so we're actually
9 o'clock.
Okay, so my favourite Bond soundtracks of all time, I mean, Marvin Hamlish's For the Spy Love Me, which again is a wonderful variation of it, and it has my favourite Bond theme of all time, which is Nobody Does It Better. Can't ignore John Barry, so my favourite 4 John Barry scores are Moonraker, On Her Majesty's Secret Service, You Only Live Twice, and Goldfinger. David Arnold's score for Casino Royale, which I think was just brilliant. I mean, and it also has a pretty good theme in, Chris Cornell's thing.
You Know My Name.
You Know My Name. I mean, that actually adds to it. The da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And then, excuse me, and then Eric Serra's for GoldenEye, which again was really interesting because he'd done Leon. The John Reno thing. And the funny thing is he also sings the climactic song in that.
Oh, does it?
So if you listen to... So Tina Turner sings the main thing, which was written by U2 and Nelly Hooper. But the actual atmospheric thing at the end is actually is GoldenEye. I mean, On Her Majesty's Secret Service is one of those rarities where the theme of the film is actually not the song.
Oh.
It's actually like We Have All the Time in the World. Maurice Binder actually told an interesting story about Sheena Easton on For Your Eyes Only, where... she misinterpreted what the Bond theme should be. So, in the opening sequence For Your Eyes Only, the last thing that Blofeld says, put me down, put me down. Yeah. So, of course, he gets dropped in. Anyway, Sheena Easton decided she wanted to write a song called Put Me Down. And Maurice Binder said, no, that's not what it is. You've got to listen to it. It's actually the title of the song. It's For Your Eyes Only. And then, of course, she did that song. So that was the theory behind that. Of course... Sheena Easton is one of those, was a rare where she actually was, I think she was the only person to actually appear on the big opening credits. Because she sings on the credits.
Oh, does she?
Yeah, For Your Eyes Only.
Watch that again, I don't remember. Yeah, because you don't see, because you do get in Live and Let Die, you get someone performing it. When he goes to see Mr. Big in the club, you get someone performing.
Somebody
Live and
does Live and Let Die. So to finish off... It is time for my all-time favourite soundtrack of all time. Drum roll, please.
Yeah, I was just thinking that, but we don't edit on the show, so yeah, there you go.
It is my all-time favourite is Saturday Night Fever.
Okay.
Oh, really? You go for that, would you?
So what it was the reason I've given 4 reasons. One of them is it serves the film.
Mm-hmm.
How many songs were in Saturday Night Fever?
There's 17 cuts. There are 17 cuts, and there are 2...
What do you mean 17 cuts?
17 tracks.
Oh, okay.
Okay. And there are 2 Bee Gees covers on it.
So I thought it was all Bee Gees songs.
No, there are 2 Bee Gees covers on it.
2 covers? Oh,
two people cover it. One of them is Yvonne Elliman singing If I Can't Have You. That was a Bee Gees song.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And you also get 2 versions of the same song. Namely, the Bee Gees sing More Than a Woman, and then Tavares sing More Than a Woman. And if you watch the movie... Right. In the rehearsals for the dance, they use the Tavares song, but
right.
in the actual routine in the club, they use the original Bee Gees thing.
Okay, right.
As I say, it works as an album on its own terms. You can record sequences in the film where the music plays, and there isn't a duff track on the album. It's one of those that I think is near perfect. Even David Shire's incidental music. So, for example, Night on Disco Mountain, which is a variation of Mussorgsky's Night on Ball Mountain, which was famously used in Fantasia. It's a sequence where they're on the bridge, and they're sort of messing around on the bridge. But also, David Shaw's Manhattan Skyline is actually used when Stephanie Magano is actually practicing, and he goes, "I understand you were practicing to be a bitch," he goes, and stuff like that. But and then, of course, at the very end of it, there's in the final sequence, you have Open Sesame's Kool and the Gang in there as well. There's You Should Be Dancing, which is the most famous one. Of course, as I said earlier, the Jive Talking was actually, I think, an additional one. I think they did a contractual thing, probably put it in there as additional track, but it's not actually in the film itself.
Oh.
I'm still trying, although I got the Blu-ray, I'll probably have to watch it again, but I don't think it's actually in the film. I think it was just part of the album. But I do remember, as I say, my father brought it home one lunchtime, and I remember opening up the double album. They got all those pictures in there, and I was too young to see it. Although that said, I did see it eventually in the more family-friendly version, the night of Charles and Diana's wedding.
Oh, okay.
It actually premiered on ITV.
What year did it come out then?
1977-78.
70s, again, another film in the 70s that was like a big, amazing film. The 70s are like the top.
And that's why I'm surprised you haven't seen Chinatown.
Never heard of it. I think you still haven't realised my background.
The whole thing is
would that been one of the, what's the sort of top 3 soundtracks, most popular soundtracks? That's got to be up there.
Saturday Night Fever, Grease, and
yeah.
I think Saturday Night.
Because they're good standalone soundtracks. They're just good. Like,
The Graduate. I think things like The Graduate is probably up there because the Simon and Garfunkel one. Because again, funny enough, that is actually a movie that actually. Again, that was another one where probably be preempted with the Simon and Garfunkel songs, again, associated with The Graduate.
Yeah.
Other ones that I'd sort of bring in here as well, for example, are Walter, a.k.a. Wendy Carlos for Tron and Clockwork Orange, because she did electronic scores. Vangelis, be it Blade Runner and the Bounty. Another honourable mention I want to do is the Sharky's Machine soundtrack, which was Snuff Garrett, the Burt Reynolds film. That's got a great score, a lot of songs on there. Also, the Randy Crawford version of Street Life on that can also be heard on Jackie Brown.
Oh.
If you want to use.
Oh, yeah, yes.
Because the same track, if you listen to that, they use the same thing. What else did I pick on here? There's a lot of really great. Funny enough, when I was looking at all these today, it's like I was actually sort of thinking, well, there's so much more. I could probably talk to you for hours and do other things as well, because there'll be other scores that come into the mix. And
who was the famous guy that did? I think he's well known. That did. Who's the bloody film? Life is a Box of Chocolates.
Oh, Forrest Gump. That was Alan Silvestri.
What he done? He did the Hulk. I think he did the Hulk.
Well, he did. He's done a whole load of things. He also did.
Yeah, he was like well known.
Well, he did. He's Robert Zemeckis' long-term collaborator.
So who's that?
Robert Zemeckis, Back to the Future, Romance of the Stone. But it also, if you watch the trailer for The Fugitive, you will also hear Silvestri's music on there for The Abyss.
Oh,
the James Cameron thing. You can actually hear. Okay. You can. It's kind of his like when there's some of the climactic stuff in The Abyss when there's sort of Ed Harris and Michael Biehn are fighting. There's actually in there as well, and it's very atmospheric. So that's another score that actually is well used in terms of.
Are there any sort of real like top class iconic scores? The sort of like that you recognise instantly, the boom boom, or the Jaws or whatever. What's the last one that's been done?
I think the Avengers theme. Dun, 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 dun. It's so. Dun, 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 it's no, because when you the funny thing is when that's again, I think today, for example, I think the new generation of people who love the music, when they hear that theme.
Right.
It's like you when you hear that dun dun da 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 dum bum bum, and it's always like it sets you again. It does exactly what a theme does, which it sets you up for the next one.
And they use all that in all the films.
Yeah, it's all there. So. Yeah, I don't think in terms of before the Avengers movies. I think they were setting up, but then when they did Avengers Assemble, I think that was the theme that came out, and it's the common thing now, because when it sort of really is, it uplifts you in the way, like with Superman or with Indiana Jones. It's like the song, or that kind of heroic.
Yeah.
Well, they use. I think in Infinity War they save it till Thor arrives, don't they?
Yeah.
They save it, and it's a huge moment, when he turns up and turns the tide of the battle. Spoiler alert.
So it is like Pavlovian conditioning. They're using it even when they know.
Well, yeah, because I don't think it's because the film's quite bleak up to that point,
okay.
and also his storyline is particularly bleak.
But I mean, to hold it back. And
because it's for the big moment of the.
Well, but again, that to me is the. But again, I think audiences now, I think because they're focusing on, I think the kind of the philosophy has shifted away from, I think music is still there and they respect it, and I think it'll take time for certain scores to catch up. I mean, a lot of when we look at the scores that I've seen here, it's kind of like a lot of the scores we've heard in the 40s and 50s. There's a whole load of scores that. If you take, one of the things that really annoyed me recently was they did a poll of the top 100 soundtracks, and they named Howard Shore's score for Fellowship of the Ring. Now, I'm not disputing it. Howard Shore's a great composer. He started with David Cronenberg. If you listen to things from The Brood onwards, some of his scores for the Cronenberg stuff's great. But what annoyed me about that poll was that there wasn't a single Jerry Goldsmith score in there. It was very, very odd.
Really?
It was so odd. I was like... And I was going, and you sort of go through the list and you're thinking...
But what was the poll for? Like, what was it, a magazine
it was a poll for the top 100 soundtracks.
But who's being polled? Is it like a
magazine? People who seem to think film began with Pulp Fiction or something. But it's like... But that was my point, was that, there was a top 100 soundtracks, and I think... It might have been just me, but it was like I just couldn't understand. Well, if you're going to talk about the all-time greatest soundtracks, how do you determine the all-time greatest? Do you determine it by decade? Do you determine it by composer? This is why when we did this tonight, I didn't want to sort of poll any favorites. I just said to you, these are great. These are specific soundtracks, and they're pinpointing the ones that sort of stand out for me per se. So it's not like I was just a little bit annoyed that. Whoever polled this, I
can't believe not even 1 in 100.
No, I couldn't agree.
I'd be shocked if there was
because
if he didn't have 1
I think
in 10.
even because the funny thing with things like, when because people are aware of it. If you look at Rogue One, people know the Star Wars film, or people see, a Spielberg thing, or they see something like that. That's what I can't. That's the only thing I can't quite get round. I'm hoping that people will respect stuff like that a bit more. And that I hope that in future people will say, right, we're going to, go and listen to these scores. They're just fantastic. And watch Chinatown and appreciate them, and watch, there's people like Miklos Roska, there's people who did Ben-Hur or some of the other classic ones.
God, yeah, if you go back to those days, they must have been really important, like that sort of...
Well, because, but also, if you go back to the early days of cinema, when there was no dialogue, you only had...
you're going right back. Yeah,
you just had you had a piano player, in the theatre, and people, when you... another one to bring up is Carl Davis, who worked with Kevin Brownlow on The Silence. Carl Davis is another one who did a really great, like when they reissued Safety Last as a Thames Silent. Carl Davis, I went to see it at the Dominion, and actually he actually composed the score, and we watched him compose the score. The funny thing is they do it today at the Royal Albert Hall. They do like these screenings with the live orchestra.
Oh, really?
So they do things like, they'll do Jurassic Park, and they'll do like the Star Wars films. I'm not quite sure how that works. It's kind of odd, because I'd rather watch the film and just listen to the score because it's part of the film. As to whether,
so is the film's playing?
The film's playing.
But is there talking?
No. I've never been to it, but I understand that they play the film. Maybe somebody who watches this can clarify if they have seen it. But it's like the evening. That's fine.
You watched it?
Our producer Kerem has watched one. We're going past.
I watched the Harry Potter one.
Oh, great! What was it like? What was great. What happens?
What they did is they basically took out the soundtrack from the film,
right?
But left everything like the sound effects and the dialogue.
Oh, right.
So it's like a special cut of the film.
Oh, okay.
And then the soundtrack, and it's a good mix as well. The soundtrack is a bit more of course.
Oh,
out than the original.
now I get you. So what they do is they kind of, so what Warner's have actually done, what they've done is they've sort of done it without. So it's obviously like a cut before, I suppose, like they do in the studio. They say, so we'll take all that out, and then they'll say, well, this is, and then they work it and propose. Right, now I get it. Oh, okay.
And you'd sit through that. Was it worth it? How much did you pay? 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 quid.
See, about 10 years ago, I went to something that was I think they called it Star Wars: A Musical Journey, and they did what at the time was the 6 films, and they played you. They didn't do the whole films. Obviously, we didn't do 12 hours, but kind of gave you an abridged version with the main themes from each.
And I do see that. Was it the actual? I think they did it actually as a DVD extra or something where they showed it was like a. I think I recall that. I do actually, and again, it was like I think Ian McDiarmid, who played the Emperor, he sort of introduced these themes, and then they showed like clips and montage.
Yeah, see, this was at the O2, and they had it was that, but it was this one was with Anthony Daniels. So he would do. So essentially, they told the story, but in a very abridged form. So it was like the Jedi were the guardians of peace of the justice and the galaxy, and then it would show you, the important bits of thingy, and it was like, and then they went to Tatooine and met a boy who would grow up to be, and blah blah blah, and so they skipped through, but they did all 6 films, and that was quite good. I'm not sure. Because, I mean, there was also a wonderful moment where they stood up and did the cantina, so you've got all these sweeping, majestic, music, and then suddenly the brass section have to stand up and go, and that was wonderful, seeing that in the O2 weather.
What's the Halloween, the advert in the, do you remember?
Yeah, it goes, dun, 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 dun. 2 more days to Halloween, Halloween,
And that bloody
Halloween. 2 more days to Halloween, Silver Shamrock. 2 more days to Halloween.
Just that,
Halloween.
and then at some point it is just the.
Put on your masks. It's time for the big giveaway at 9. Gather around. Put your TV on.
Oh God!
And it's at the very end, spoiler alert. But when Tommy goes, "There's no more time, please stop it, stop it."
Which Halloween was that?
Halloween 3, Season of the Witch.
Oh, is that late? I thought it was earlier.
But again, it's
Not
like,
that bloody song.
That's the spin-off, isn't it? That's the one that steps out of.
yeah. But it's
that's
actually.
right,
But to be honest with you, it actually.
So that because I got confused. So what was it? What happened there then?
What it was
Michael Myers in 1 and 2.
No. There is a reference to Michael Myers in Halloween 3. What it is Tommy Lee Wallace wrote it. Nigel Neal, who did Quatermass, was actually original writer, and he was doing. So the story goes, he was writing a remake for Creature from the Black Lagoon for Universal at the time, and Nigel Neal there was a major disagreement. He didn't like the fact that I loved the ideas. He wanted to work with Tommy Lee Wallace, and then Nigel Neal said, "I didn't care about the audience, didn't want to do it." But the story is that there's so there are some elements in Halloween 3 like Stonehenge, like the magical stones, and what it is an old man is being pursued by this suited guy, and he ends up in a hospital, and he says, they're coming, and he's holding a Halloween mask. So Dr. Dan Chalice, played by Tom Atkins, goes with the daughter of the man who's killed to Santa Mira, where they make these masks, and then of course it turns out that this town is run by Conal Cochran, who runs the factory, and he's got a sinister plan for the kids of America.
Yeah, so it's nothing. How does the 2 films join together?
They don't.
They
don't.
It's
See,
just-
no, the idea was
So what? How
at
would
the
that
end
work?
at the end of Halloween 2, basically, they had no more story to tell. So John Carpenter and Deborah Hill wanted to do like a Twilight Zone. He wanted to tell different Halloween stories.
Right. So just using the name.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's going to be like anthology.
The problem was that Mustafa Akkad, who was the producer of the film, all of a sudden, because it was kind of like what the audience wants. It's kind of like with Friday the 13th. They were when they made the final chapter, they were going to kill off Jason. And then the problem is it made so much more money than the original. They just kept going. They just came up with ideas to revive him like Frankenstein. With Halloween, for example, they made Halloween 3. It didn't do all that well. It's still grown. It's actually grown in stature as a film in its own right.
Yeah.
It's actually...
It's not a bad film.
It's enough. I mean, they should have just called it Season of the Witch.
Yeah.
But the audience, Halloween and Michael Myers are entwined. So they came back in 1989 with the 88 with the return of Michael Myers, and then they built it up again. So building it up, and then John Carpenter on the latest one just wanted to bring it back. So, and I think what's great is the seriousness and what defined that original movie. I mean, it's a greatest hits compilation, the new film, and I love it for that reason, because it just felt good to see Michael Myers as he should be. It wasn't a parody. But that's what happened with Halloween 3.
So that Halloween is Coming that we tune, do you think is that royalty free? I'm just trying to think, what could we close the show out with?
Well, it doesn't end. No, it doesn't end with. Halloween 3 doesn't end like that. It ends with actually, funnily enough, the Halloween 3 score is actually the most un-Halloween score by John Carpenter. It's done by John Carpenter and Alan Howarth.
Okay.
And it's gone boom, 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 and there's a real pumping opening track. It's known as the Chariots of Pumpkins. That's the open. That's what it's known as. And then there's
not the most sinister.
But there is actually, when they're riding to Santa Maria, there's actually a similar kind of theme to Halloween. Dun, dun, bum, 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 bum. And it's like a similar, same kind of style as the Halloween theme, but it's not Halloween. But it's a great score. I mean, there's a real pumping, it's a great synthesizer score, and one of Carpenter. That's probably one of my other favorite Carpenter scores as well.
I've noticed, in terms, talking about simple soundtracks, there's one I feel that we've omitted.
Mm-hmm. Oh, Psycho.
Yeah.
Oh well, no. I mean, again.
I mean, you can't cover it.
No, I'm not. But again, I would probably, if you want to talk about another composer, I'd include Bernard Herrmann for North by Northwest and Psycho.
What's the thing with the Psycho? I don't know if it's that noise. That's birds being scared.
I can't.
No, it's actually
it's a type of bird being scared.
It's
and they sped it up.
It's
or
actually
something.
it's actually strings. The actual score for Psycho is all strings.
No, but I mean that.
No, that's strings.
Oh,
it's
violins. Somebody said to me that was birds.
No, it's violins.
Yeah.
It's interesting how iconic that moment is, because I did my
you just
I
did
normally
an arm
describe, but
movement.
all I did was jabbing with my arm, and that was it, and everyone knew what it was. But I think that moment has so permeated the culture. Kids, I'm sure kids who've never even seen that film probably.
But it's also the theme itself. Again, the music. It's not just that. Then bum bum. I mean, funnily enough, Richard Band stole it for Reanimator.
Oh, okay.
If you listen to boom, and the funny thing, if you listen to the score, it goes boom, ba boom, bum, da 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 da. And the funny thing is, you go bum bum bum, and he's actually, it's weird because it works and it doesn't work, but it pisses you off because he's blatantly nicked it. But again, that's another one where the score for works so highly effectively, because the actual, the way that, that sound's been edited. So the key moments, like, for example, where when Marion Crane's, when Janet Leigh sort of she's in the house and she's getting ready and she wants to take the money, and then the camera pans down on there. And there's a shot of them, and then the camera pans across, and it goes that, da, 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 da. And then of course there's the pumping, the actual track of, that whole kind of same track of the theme opens up like that anyway. But it just moves forward because it just follows her, and it just adds so much to the soundtrack. And then of course when Martin Balsam gets it, there's that very faint. The actual very faint, suspenseful violin. Yeah. And then it suddenly cuts to like.
Well, it's used 3 times, isn't it? It's her death, Arbogast, and then the reveal.
Climax, and then the reveal. But again, and also as well, that part of Bernard Herrmann's score was used in Star Wars.
What the?
The last thing, dum boom boom. Where they're in the Death Star. They're in the Falcon when they're in the Death Star, and they're in those compartments. Mm-hmm. When they lift up the compartments and they when they're hiding in the Falcon, when they pull the things up, well, they borrowed part of Herrmann's score for that scene.
What, from Psycho? Really?
Yeah. You watch that sequence where the stormtroopers are looking around the screen.
Yeah, who's more foolish, the fool or the...
Yeah, that bit. Well, if you listen, when they lift the compartments up, that's actually a sample from Psycho.
So the is that Darth Vader's?
That's Darth Vader's theme. Yeah.
That's his theme.
Yeah,
Has that changed in the?
No, it's again, that's another one where when they got to Revenge of the Sith, when they eventually got to the point where, Vader was revealed, it was great because it's kind of one of those iconic moments. And they actually use this in Rogue One as well. It's so, again, that's another one that, and also this theme for the Emperor, they used it. Yeah, but again, that was a theme that they used for, I think, in the prequels. You kind of sense.
Yeah, that was always like the FYI. This guy's going to become the Emperor.
Oh.
You mean the guy that's dressed exactly like the Emperor, played by the same actor?
Yeah.
But I suppose the idea is you might be coming to those films for the first time.
Yeah.
But it's because they use the Imperial March even in Attack of the Clones, even when it's not connected with Vader, with the the clone tree.
The actual, I think the end of Attack of the Clones, where I think it's there's a different theme for when they show the clones on Kamina. But I think at the very end of it, when Palpatine is looking out and you've got all the ships taking off and stuff, that's the clone. And then it cuts to the theme between Padme and Anakin. Again, that's another iconic theme that's come out, like the da, 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 da.
I mean, that's the thing to say about the prequels is I think the score for those is brilliant, regardless of what you think of the film.
Well, Duel of the Fates, the
fantastic,
but again, I think that I feel that the Phantom Menace does, in a way, get treated unfairly from times because of what's happened since. It's like, for example, people moan about Jar Jar Binks, but without Jar Jar Binks, would we have had Gollum? If you think of all the beginning story, the origin stories we've had, we had Batman Begins, we've had the Avengers, we've had everything else. When you think of all the digital technology, would they have been able to make Lord of the Rings the way that they had them without the kind of pioneering technology in there? You get motion capture, a lot of this stuff. It's like, I like the prequels anyway because I think I might mention this before. The first half of Phantom Menace with the pod race, up until the pod race, I love. The Obi-Wan Jango Fett subplot in Attack of the Clones, I think, is actually the best thing about it. The third film I like. The only thing that pisses me off, I would have had a rival for Padme between him and Anakin, like a Han Solo rival, like somebody who was in there. And that was my biggest disappointment. I would love to have seen Han Solo in Revenge of the Sith, a younger version, trying to sweep, had Anakin trying to do a Jedi mind trick on Han Solo.
Well, that's soundtracks.
Yeah.
I think we've learned a lot there. Andrew figured a lot out.
Yeah, I mean, just very quickly back to
go
that. The only thing I would say is that the sequel trilogy. So we're Force Awakens, thingy, and then we've Last Jedi, and then we've got Rise of
Skywalker.
I don't think any of them have given us a theme on the level.
No, they've. If you listen to, there are actually two. There's Kylo Ren's theme go da 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 da, and then there's Rey's theme go dun da da dun dun da da dun 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 da da dun dun da da dun 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 da da dun.
I might have to go back and watch.
No, when you watch when she arrives, when she slides down the sand from the destroyer, goes. Dun, 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 dun,
So we're going to get are these going to be our two main themes in the
and
final show?
And actually, as well, if you watch the trailer for, if you watch have you seen the new teaser? Rise of Skywalker.
I've seen the Rise of Skywalker one, yeah.
Yeah, but again, that's got they're using the actual Princess Leia theme in there. Dun, dun, and actually, it's like, and also, and I think Lando Calrissian's score is, I think that because Billy D. Williams is back as Lando Calrissian, so that's going to feature, dun, 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 dun.
Oh, okay. I was just thinking now, the only score that stands out to me that I remember at the time, just jogged my memory, is that Danny Boyle's 28 Days Later.
Yeah.
I remember watching it and thinking, is the music extra loud, or am I noticing in it? Right at the beginning when he's being.
But then it's very quiet and kind of creepy, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm just trying to think. But I noticed that the music was sort of like, because it was that he'd do the silent thing, like you just said, you'd have loud music and then it just go to silence. Is that specific to horror? It must be.
I think it's part of the, like we were talking earlier about The Omen. The fact that they But again, it's one of those scenes where if a director or an editor can sense. And an editor and composer will probably be able to sense with certain specifics. The director knows that he can say, well, I want to put music there, there, and there. And the editor will say, well, actually, but again, it's down to the variables. It's down to the editor to say, if they cut it a certain way, then the composer has a much easier job in trying to create what they're trying to do. And again, it's a collaborative thing that, if they can't sort of go to a composer at the beginning and say we want this, that, or the other, because we haven't made anything yet. I think it's later. It's specifically where I think normally a composer will come on board in post-production. So when they're finally getting to the point where, they'll often use a temp track.
Right.
So I think in the case of Star Wars, they use things like Holster Planet just to sort of get an idea. What they did was they got a lot of classical tracks and said, well, look, okay, John, this is how I want this to be. And then he can go off and then write the score.
Yeah.
And then that's it. That's how they can do it. So they can use a lot of temp tracks. I mean, they do it on a lot of rough cuts anyway.
I'd heard once that Ennio Morricone, apparently he just goes off and does it, and then
it is what it is.
he's just like, there's my score. And they're like, we haven't actually started filming yet, Ennio, but, thanks. It's going great. I don't know if that's true.
I think
Excuse me.
but I think also there are certain composers, because they've been doing it so long.
Yeah.
I think if you become a prestigious composer like a Goldsmith or a Williams or a Horner or a Morricone, then they know that they can get a sense because they see so much. John Williams can sort of dictate how he. It's an amazing talent to have, and it's an amazing thing to do, because I think music is actually the driving pulse of the piece. Okay, so or it's just one of those things that it becomes part of the whole of watching it. If you can recognize the theme and think about the music afterwards, and you say, oh, but your goal is to watch the movie and enjoy it. But like I remember watching Battle Beyond the Stars, and the music stood out. Halloween stood out for me. The Star Wars from Raiders of the Lost Ark stood out for me. The theme from Total Recall, when seeing it on the big screen. I mean, Escape from New York, for example, when we rented that out as a family, we actually had a turntable, and I connected up the VHS recorder to the turntable.
Okay.
And played Escape from New York. And actually the soundtrack, it was two speaker mono, but it really enhanced it. So the soundtrack boomed out.
So you did your own sort of preemptive surround sound.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't really surround sound. It was actually,
Just
you had so we had the TV there
in the middle,
and then I had the turntable to the side there. And then, of course, after I watched it, I disconnected it all, and then I came home and then played the VHS again with my parents, and they said, I played this with the turntable. And anyway, so they said, well, bloody put it back on. And then we played it again. And again, it added so much to it, because that whole score and the actual synthesizer sound, it really added something to it. And they are, scores are just, I think next to watching movies, they're probably my favorite thing.
Fair enough.
So soundtracks, that's pretty interesting. The Bond, quickly, the Bond films, what are they, because they've been going on for so long, how many times have they changed composer?
I think so going through the scores, so it was John Barry, George Martin, Marvin Hamlish, Bill Conti, Michael Kamen, Eric Serra, David Arnold, Thomas Newman.
Okay, so that's quite a lot there, and that was we all know who.
I thought they tend to stick to the people.
And then, of course, if you include Monty Norman, who did the theme for Bond, John Barry didn't do the theme. I mean, Monty Norman is credited with the theme for the Bond film.
Oh, I want to finish off quick, but two films. So, the Raging Bull opening theme.
Yeah, that's Cavalera Rusticana.
That's it. Yeah,
it's actually it's an opera.
Yeah, that's right.
And it also features in the climax of Godfather Part 3.
It's the slow motion, isn't it? When he's
I always thought like that. Whenever with Godfather Part 3, I'm like, that piece of music is so associated with Raging Bull, and the fact that they chuck it in at the end of it. If I was Scorsese, I'd be like, do you know what, Francis? Fuck you. You know what?
but again, it works. I mean, I don't think there's any real. I mean, for example, when I hear Be My Baby by the Ronettes in Dirty Dancing, I hear that song in Quadrophenia. Because in Quadrophenia, it's when they
The original Quadrophenia.
In the original, when they arrive, basically there's a party they go to in this house, and it's the track that they play. So of course it's like, and I think Leslie Ash and her boyfriend at the time going, and I hear that track. So it was always a bit off-putting when I saw Dirty Dancing at the cinema in '87. Again, it was a track that I thought, oh, this is, and that was the thing that I didn't word associate with it anyway. But that said, one final recommendation is the soundtrack to McVicker.
Okay, I don't think I know that.
Well, McVicker is John
70s.
McVicker. It's 1980. It's Roger Daltrey is John McVicker, Public Enemy #1. But it's actually got a great song score in there. But it's also got some great incidental music by Jeff Wayne, who did War of the Worlds.
Oh, okay.
Escape Part 1 and Escape Part 2. Check it out on YouTube if you can, or check it out if you can. It's got a great lead song by Daltrey called "Free Me." Free me, can you hear? That's what I say. And there's things like
I haven't seen Quadrophenia. Is that must have a lot of music in it? Like
it's actually the album, but it also features a lot of like 60s stuff. So there's like Louie Louie and Be My Baby and He's So Fine and Rhythm of the Rain and stuff.
So who did the first Godfathers, first and second?
It was Nino Rota, but the music was conducted by Carmine Coppola, Francis's father.
Oh, really?
And he actually won the Oscar.
Was he a composer?
He was a composer, but he had one of the funniest speeches. He said,
I think I
because he said, I want to thank Francis, because if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be here. But then again, if it wasn't for me, he wouldn't be here either.
Yeah.
And Coppola said at the time, he goes, "Oh, thanks for giving my father the Oscar." But it's like, that is just so great. But again, that to me is another iconic score.
Yeah.
The second one particularly, but I like the. It has one of my favorite moments in A Godfather Part 2 where he's going, and then he goes, I want you to go, like it's
there you go, soundtracks. That was pretty interesting. Kerem,
Yeah.
Interesting sound. You liked it. You threw your little bit in there about the Hobbit. Was it the Hobbit? No, where did
No, Harry Potter.
Harry Potter.
All right, well, listen.
Small people and wizards. It's
Yeah, all right, well, that'll do then. John, thank you very much.
You're
Very
welcome.
interesting again.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
I'd like to end on
Yeah.
ba-bum, ba-bum.
What are you trying to be Jaws?
No, oh bloody hell! No, the thing. What's the?
Oh.
Yeah, is it?
Boom, 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 boom,
Boom, boom.
boom.
Does that
It's
mean
that
we're all
bloody
just
dog.
gonna?
It's just that bloody Alsatian just running through the sound.
So is that the thing now? We're all just gonna sit here and see what happens.
We'll keep going until
Which one of us turns out? to be,
Kerem turns it off.
thing.
Ba-bum.
Are we actually just booming to the end? Good night, everyone.
Good night.
For God's sake, turn it off. This is getting